So thank you everyone for the opportunity. I'll be brief and then hand over to Spiros to present the slides, but I'll stay with the discussion for as long as I can. But I just wanted to say I think this is really an important milestone that the ICH E8 general considerations on clinical trials has been finalized and will come into application next year. It's a big milestone on the journey of renovation of GCP, which involved that document and the good clinical practice E6, which is the meeting I've just stepped out of and which is ongoing, and where we in fact this morning have just had a meeting with the representatives of academia from the different regions, reviewing the most up-to-date version of draft text in some parts, currently on parts of the investigator site, and monitoring also by the sponsor and aspects of sponsor activity. So that's really active, and their contributions are very important and enriching to the discussions. So I'd like to also to make you aware of that, and I think we can come back in another meeting in the new year to update more on that. But with the E8 in particular, I just wanted to highlight that this also for the Patients and Consumers Working Party marks a big step, because it introduces as a general principle of clinical trials and medicine development, the engagement with patients and the contribution of patients. So we have a paragraph now. There are three general principles. One is the protection of trial participants. The second is a scientific approach to the conduct of trials. And these were there, although they've been updated. But the third one now is really to introduce this concept of engagement with patients who may be participants or future users of medicines. And you'll see the wording on the slides when Spiros presents. So, and I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Maria Mavris, Natalie Baer, and Cassie Iman, who prepared the draft of that wording, which has largely survived the negotiations and discussion processes. But thanks to everybody who's supported that. It's really enabled us to bring this to fruition. And secondly, then, and most important to researchers as well, is the more proportionate approach to trial design and conduct and the processes, and focusing on those items which are critical to the quality of the trial, whether protection of participants and reliability of the results, and in particular generating results that are good enough to support good decision making. So we're not necessarily looking for perfection, but focus on those things really needed to support decision making. So I'll just leave it there, but I think it's I'm happy to be with you, because I think it's been a really important achievement, and where these working parties have made a good significant contribution to the discussions and continue to do in the evolving discussion. Spiros is presenting now with me, because I'll be transitioning the place at the ICH working group on E6 to GCP to Spiros over the next 6 or so months, because I'll be retiring in May, but we want to make sure really good succession planning and that we have good continuity on the discussions. I'm glad Spiros has been able to join today, but we'll both be part of that discussion. But you'll see Spiros much more active in this space and as the months go by. So thanks very much, Spiros, and Chair, I hope you're there, Spiros, with the slides.
Thank you. If we can put up the slides, please. It's difficult to step in Fergus's shoes, but I will do my best. Now consider that I'm new and I cannot have Fergus's knowledge yet, but he's here to help. If we can have the next slide, it's a short summary of what has happened with GCP and ICH and E8 in the last years. We have the reflection paper in 2017 on the modernization and renovation of E6. And then later in the next slide, please. The focus is that E6 and E8 should ensure a well-designed and well-articulated protocol, which is the most important tool for developing drugs. And the next one, history, we had, I would say, I have been also myself in ICH since 2002 in different roles, and I can for sure say that in the almost 20 years I'm following, this was the widest stakeholder consultation we had in ICH when either issuing or revising a guideline. Here is a list of what we have done. In the next, please. This one, yes, it is now the E8, which has been just finalized. For you, maybe for those who are not so familiar with ICH, the E8 was one of the first guidelines. It was finalized in 1997. The E6 was finalized in 1996, but the E6 had sort of part revision with an integrated addendum finalized in 2016. And this is the overview. As you see, what dominates actually the overview, but also the guideline, is quality. Quality by design. What are the most important critical to quality factors, examples, etc. And perhaps I can explain a bit what it means, this focus on the quality. The next one, please. The general principles, of course, start with the most important issue, which is the protection of clinical study participants and what we have to do to ensure that this is done in a proper way. I'm not going to read the entire slide. The next one, please. And here we come with a scientific approach in clinical study design, planning, contact analysis, and reporting. When we speak about quality of a clinical study, is to make sure that the clinical study is fit for purpose to answer the questions which need to be answered to support decision making, while at the same time protecting study participants. And I will not read the rest. The next, please. This is, of course, something which is very important and central for this meeting and for ICH in general. We have, as a last chapter in the general principles, the patient input into drug development. And those of us who have been in the business for a few decades will remember that until relatively recently, the patient's involvement in the development of protocols was minimal or non-existing. And in the last years, we recognize with many projects, also in IMI and elsewhere, that to include patients and consider patients who live with a condition when designing a clinical trial protocol, a clinical trial, is very important. Very simple issues highlighted here where patients can be paramount in advising and having a view, appropriate population and duration, acceptable comparators, etc. Next, please. Now, when we talk about quality, what is the, you can say that, okay, quality, yes, to identify the critical quality attributes for a clinical trial. That goes without say, that is common sense. It is not as easy. The easiest thing, of course, is to go and designate almost everything in the clinical trial critical quality attributes, but this will make the trial unmanageable and will be counterproductive. Therefore, the method's quality by design, quality of clinical trial, is to identify those elements which are critical for the clinical trial and which you have to pay attention to. Next one, please. And here it is, identifying attributes whose integrity is fundamental for the clinical trial. And triage, so find these important elements and focus on essential activities. Next one, please. And further, establishing a culture that supports open dialogue. That is also important, that Clinical trials, the clinical trial protocols tend to be overcomplicated, tend to be full of tools and checklists, and as soon as you change a tiny thing, you have to redo the entire thing, and because the principle is not to change anything, but this is not the spirit of the quality by design in clinical trials. Establish a culture that supports open dialogue, values and rewards critical thinking. Next one, please. We have talked about stakeholders, patients, and treating physicians, equally important, and reviewing critical to quality factors built on accumulated experience and knowledge with periodic review of critical to quality factors to determine whether adjustments to risk control mechanisms are needed. This is the flexibility which is now introduced into the new concept of designing clinical trials. We have to acknowledge that new and unanticipated issues may arise once the study has begun and react to this. It's not this is the protocol and nothing can be changed. The next one, please. So the overall revision of the E8 and then which is followed by the E6 revision, which meeting is taking place in parallel and where Fergus will have to return. The summary is E8 supports designing quality into clinical studies, considering the diversity of clinical study designs and data sources used to support regulatory and other health policy decisions. The annex of the E8 has a number of clinical trials for which are used, not focusing only on the known randomized trials, big and the way in the past was considered the only way to develop a trial, to develop a drug, but acknowledging all other sorts of clinical trials. And the E6 update renovation will have chapters also on these other forms of clinical trials, which play an increasing role. And we're going to come back to you as the E6 is developing to give you an update. The next one, please. And this is here the message: change the way we all work. Don't add more to the status quo, but change management is the greatest challenge. Adjusting behaviors, attitudes away from preconceived ideas and interests and onto a new, better way of working. These are not buzzwords. This is something, a message which we have to give. And you must also consider that ICH does not consist anymore of experienced EU and FDA regulators and Japanese HTA. Too much HTA from Michael and Bruno before. ICH is now the world. It is Brazil, it is China, it is South Korea, it's Taiwan, and more to come, let alone Canada, and etc. And there are a lot of members there who were not around when the principles of E6 and E8 were developed. And okay, you can read the guideline, but if you're not part of the development of the guideline, you cannot really encompass the guideline in the same way. So for these members, this renovation of the E6 and E8 is a way also to embed and basically adjust their behaviors and attitudes, which is here, to this spirit. And the next one, I believe we are approaching the end. Yes, as we said, the ICH E8 is on the website as usual. The ICH guidelines have a period of implementation, months coming into application, where the members need to adjust. There are members who have to simply translate, for example. It's like very simple things in addition to the general implementation. And on the E6, then we will come back with the development. Thank you to Fergus for giving me his slides, and thank you all. And any questions, I'm now can sit back and relax, because if I cannot answer, Fergus is here.